Good afternoon. On behalf of the NC Chamber, welcome to Education, the Road to Recovery and Resiliency. I am Janelle Boyd with the NC Chamber. All attendees are muted to avoid any distractions during today's presentation. If time permits, we will answer as many questions as possible at the end of the presentation. If you would like to submit a question during the meeting, use the question and answer box. Please do not use the chat box. You may upvote the questions you most want answered by clicking on the thumbs up for that question. The questions with the most votes will be answered first. The recording of today's webinar will be made available to you via email within 24 hours of the webinar. Now, I would like to introduce today's moderator, Deborah Durr, Director of Government Affairs for the NC Chamber. Deborah?
Thank you, Janelle, and good afternoon to all of you who have joined us to hear from some of our education thought leaders in North Carolina to discuss education, the road to recovery and resiliency. Our panelists today are Peter Hans, President of NC Community Colleges, Dr. Anthony Jackson, Superintendent of Vance County Schools and North Carolina Superintendent of the Year, and Dr. Randy Woodson, Chancellor of NC State University. Thank you all for joining us today. We greatly appreciate you taking time out to be with us. Now, this is very interesting because yesterday began National Teacher Appreciation Week. And today, May 5th, not necessarily Cinco de Mayo, but it is Teacher Appreciation Day. So perhaps 2020 should be titled the Year of Teacher Appreciation. I think that might be something given COVID-19 and everything that the teachers are having to go through now. I think that would be a good moniker for them. And what a timely topic for us to take up today, which is going to lead us into our first question, and this will be for all of our panelists. As you begin to reimagine education during COVID-19, what are some of the lessons learned thus far by pivoting from the classroom to online teaching? And what new practices are you and your colleagues already planning for when school reopens? We'll start with you, Chancellor Woodson.
Well, thank you. Well, first of all, I think what we learned is that we can pivot very quickly when we need to. And I just give tremendous credit to our faculty for moving so quickly, really within a period of a week, to move 98% of our curriculum online. And our students for their flexibility. I mean, this has not been the semester that any of our students dreamed about when they attended a university like NC State, but yet they forged ahead and they dealt with it like all of us have. And so I'm just so proud of the work that our faculty did to get our material online and to do everything we could to keep the academic continuity that our students so much need at this point in time. And like a lot of our students, this is commencement time. And I know we're doing everything we can, as I know all of K through 12 is across the state, as well as the community colleges, to celebrate the accomplishments of our students. But I'm just proud of the way that we've pivoted to do everything we can to keep our students going forward.
Thank you. President Hans.
Well, like Chancellor Woodson, it is important to celebrate our graduates, their accomplishments, their resilience, and their future in this very strange, crazy time. But I'm incredibly proud of the community college's response here. We pride ourselves on being nimble and agile, very responsive, so culturally well-suited to respond in a crisis, although it's something that we would never wish to see again. But our colleges, the students, the faculty, the staff have rallied, very little complaining, just focused on student success, that can-do community college attitude. And over the course of the pandemic, we've worked very hard to move those courses and classes that could be moved online there and do so successfully, but also kept crucial public health and public safety programs running throughout with very careful in-person instruction, because of the public health and public safety pipeline. I'm talking about nursing, respiratory therapy, police, fire, EMS, very critical for the state's response to this emergency. And the model's been a success thus far, so we're moving to expand that approach to other key areas as the governor's stay-at-home order evolves. These key areas include transportation, the trades, construction, manufacturing, that sort of thing, where we can prioritize the health and safety of our students and employees, but we can help lead the way as our economy gets up and running again, so that our focus is move forward carefully, be ready to welcome students back on campus as soon as possible. And I'm hopeful we can get it done soon. I appreciate the role that the Chamber is playing in this whole question, particularly with today's unveiling of the Relaunching North Carolina effort. Very thoughtful approach that largely consistent with the governor's approach as well. So glad to be your partners in that effort.
Thank you, President Hans. Superintendent Jackson.
I think, am I on? I would
Yes,
think
you
that
are.
one of the greatest lessons that we've learned about public schools in our state is that for a lot of us and for a lot of communities, we learned very quickly that public schools are a very important ingredient in the glue that holds many of our communities together. As our teachers have had to pivot to provide continuity in instruction and extension and enrichment activities for kids, we've had to be engaged in ensuring that our communities that are challenged around food security and shelter security, that those needs have been met. And then most importantly, I think we've had the unique opportunity to partner with our parents differently. They now have walked in our shoes. And so one of the greatest I think opportunities and lessons that we've learned is that we both should take regular periods of time to really respect and reflect on the shoes that the other walks in as we provide and partner for the education of our students. We are in a very different period, but specifically for us in Vance County, we've chosen to see this as an opportunity to look at the entire process of educating our kids very differently. So one of the great lessons out there is that as we reach or as we approach any challenge, we've got to approach it or respond to it with optimism, and that we respond with it with a willingness to say, this is but we're calling this pandemic more of a speed bump as opposed to a mountain. We can get over it, and when we get to the other side, we'll be better for it.
Great, and no doubt there's a lot of planning that all of you have to make, and you're doing in order to get over that speed bump. And no doubt one of the things, Superintendent Jackson, that you guys are, and throughout the entire state of North Carolina, K through 12, you're probably trying to figure out for those elementary school students who have fallen behind, what sort of provisions are you now making to get them prepared for the next school year?
Well, we would say that we're concerned about all of our students and the potential academic slide that they may have experienced. And so it's critical that we continue to work with that our teachers continue to maintain connection, one, with our students to ensure that and we're looking at it purely from an enrichment and extension perspective, making sure that our students stay engaged in activities that would keep them curious about learning new things, and embrace something that I think we've lost in the teaching learning process. Not all learning takes place in a formal classroom. And I think we have to develop opportunities to value and to respect those new things that our kids are learning while they're away from us, and really try to make those connections back. Our kids are learning lessons by watching us. They're also learning, let's see this pandemic as a huge problem-based learning exercise for our kids. And I think as we begin to reimagine what we are and who we are when we come back, why not ask them? Why not ask them what the impact of all of this should be on what we do next and how schooling should look? Why not ask our parents? Why not build a new paradigm where in fact those things are now a part of that conversation? So as kids come back, I think we're going to have to honor that some learning took place that we cannot account for, that would not have happened in classrooms. That's valuable. Secondly, I think we're going to have to be very quick to assess and determine where our kids are, because they left us mid-year. And so we're going to have to pick up where we are and in fact realign the work so that we can pick up and move kids forward. But I think we're also going to have to be willing to accept those kids who have the slide. I'm also concerned about those kids who've accelerated during this period of time because of this new learning, because I think that's going to be a challenge too, because there are going to be some kids who have learned a lot of the lessons that maybe they were waiting to get to because of grade level expectations, but they may be ahead now. They may have already conquered some of those standards and learned through experience those things that they might need moving forward. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us, but we look forward to doing it.
That's great. And we understand that in the process of while the kids are still at home, Wolfpack Works is still on the job helping teachers get through this process as they are reaching out to their students. Tell us more about that, Chancellor Woodson.
Wolfpack Works is a project out of our College of Education. It really helps the K through second grade educator in areas of reading and writing and the instruction associated with that curriculum. It's always been a hybrid model of education, and we're in 16 school districts across the state of North Carolina, including Vance County. We're proud to be a partner with Dr. Jackson and his colleagues. But this has always been a project that has been a hybrid model. That is both online education to the educators as well as in-person education. And we pivoted to put as much of this online as possible, checking in with educators across the state and doing everything we can as a College of Education to help those frontline educators that are working so hard every day to help students in the earliest grades in our system to learn how to read and learn how to communicate through both reading and writing is such a critical thing for the continued success of our students. So I'm proud that our program continues to be active and has, like the educators on our campus, has pivoted to reaching out to communicators, to educators across the state in such a positive way.
So now you guys have had this great experience, although you had to get down and dirty right quick to pivot to online. Do you anticipate continuing some sort of hybrid model as we work through this new way of education and reimagining what that looks like, as Dr. Jackson alluded to?
Well, without a doubt, there's so much that we've learned, just as I'm sure is true for the community college and the K through 12 system, about ways that we can work differently that benefits our students and benefits our community. But I have to be very clear to the audience today, at a university like NC State, and I'm sure that's true for my colleagues, we really do believe in the community of scholars. That is the community of teachers working hand in hand with students, and just the hands-on experience that occurs in both inside the classroom and outside the classroom on our campuses every day. So I don't want anyone to misunderstand that, yes, we've learned a lot and we can apply that to improved education going forward, but we can't wait to get students back in our classroom, back on our campuses, and back interacting with the educators and interacting with one another. I mean, one of the things we knew going into this, and I'm sure we've learned a lot about it, is that students benefit so much from their peers, so much from being around their colleagues in the classroom and as Superintendent Jackson said, and outside the classroom. So I don't want to lose anything we're learning, and I want to apply it to the best of our ability. But I do want to get back into an environment where we can we can interact with one another for the purpose of education.
Would either one of you guys like to address that as well, President Hans?
Well, I think Chancellor Woodson and Superintendent Jackson stated it quite well, and I associate myself completely with the two of those great leaders. I would say the move to online instruction for so many of our programs really highlighted for me the difference in access to high-speed internet and technology for students in different parts of our state. And I've been really encouraged by the creative approaches our colleges have taken, like drive-in parking lot Wi-Fi access. I'm proud of them because, again, that's the typical can-do community college attitude. And we'll need to harness more of that creativity moving forward to ensure that all of our students have access and connectivity, because we cannot afford to leave them behind just because of where they live. Community colleges are the ladder to the middle class for so many, and not everyone is used to online instruction. So for the sake of the students who do better in those organized settings, I believe we'll need to focus on more robust supports, such as advising and tutoring, that sort of wrap-around comprehensive support. And like I said before, we're also working through how do you safely resume more of our in-person instruction later this summer, certainly in the fall, because you can't move classes like welding online. We've got to use the best health and safety practices so students have multiple paths forward based on whatever is the best fit for them.
Well, let me hold you there for a minute, President Hans. During your presentation to the House Education Working Group, you spoke of the uncertainties around funding, enrollment, and instruction that the community college system was facing due to COVID-19. What has happened since that presentation on April 2nd to erase or alleviate some of the uncertainty around those issues you laid out over a month ago, in fact?
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. As I mentioned, the response by our faculty and staff has been incredibly encouraging. Our colleges are offering high quality online instruction, and we'll be ready for the students regardless of how they arrive. Happy to report, of course, that all of us have been the beneficiaries of the Federal CARES Act. Although with federal money comes federal strings, and it's been frustrating for us, I'm sure my colleagues as well, because the rules and interpretation around the use of that money has made it difficult for us to deploy it as strategically as I think we would all prefer. Happy to report the legislature fully funded the request I made in that appearance before the committee to assist us as we improve our online offerings and prepare to move our students forward. And we're very grateful for that support from the public sector and the private sector. We have no greater partner than the business community at the community colleges, and they've been there for us. We'll be there for them as we go through this economic recovery and the numbers of unemployed North Carolinians come to our doors for support.
Well, that's great. In yesterday's governor's press briefing, there were leadership members from both sides of the aisle and both houses. And when asked, quite often they mentioned that education, they really don't know what things are going to look like as we move through this process. But education, it seemed to me, with all of them, was top of mind. And although they spoke of a looming possible $4 billion deficit, education still came out top. So it's such a wonderful place to be, to know that people are clearly understanding the need of making sure that the structure of education remains intact, although it might be under attack, if you will, based on COVID-19, but everyone has the best interest of education in mind. COVID-19 has definitely widened the opportunity gap and exacerbated what was already a leaky talent pipeline. Now, share with us from your vantage point, what is it going to take to put the education system and workforce development on a sustained road to recovery? We'll start with you, Superintendent Jackson.
Quite frankly, I think it's going to take a bold vision to have us understand that, one, things are never going to be the same again. We're going to have to take the best, and I appreciate the way it was framed by the Chancellor, that we're going to have to take the best of what we've learned and maintain those things that we knew worked well for us. So it's really going to take a really clear vision about what's next. And not bemoan those things that we can no longer do, but embrace those things that are on the horizon that may make us a stronger entity for kids. The second is that we're going to have to expand opportunities for anywhere, anytime learning. Because in fact, right now we proved that we could pivot and change at the way we needed to meet whatever needs are going to be there. So that means that we have demonstrated our flexibility. And so pivoting and changing direction in the best interest of not only, in this case, to meet the needs of a pandemic, but in the future, it may well be that we have to pivot and change to meet the needs of the workforce, to meet the needs of the economy, to meet the needs of a regional initiative. We have to be able to maintain that flexibility. And as I would always say, it's going to require us to have a high level of grace and recognize that some kids were impacted by this in different ways, some academically, some social and emotionally, and some just through attrition, just not understanding how this could happen. So we're going to have to be willing to accept that there are going to be different pots, and people are going to find themselves in those pots at different times, and we're going to have to be prepared to meet their needs so that they can continue to make forward progress, so that at the end of that pipeline, we still have strong, resilient, prepared workers who can impact their local economies and, in fact, help us continue to grow as a state and as a nation.
Thank you. Chancellor Woodson.
Yeah, Deborah, you have on the panel today 3 people that care deeply about education and the transformative power of education. I mean, it's the great equalizer in this world and certainly in this country. And as I said in some of our early conversations, Dr. Jackson and Peter Hans have heard me say this before, that, you know, when you come to one of our organizations in K through 12 or community college or to public university in North Carolina, the education is the equalizer. You come to our place and we provide a wonderful opportunity for you to transform your lives. As we pivoted because of this pandemic, we've come to appreciate greater than ever the challenges so many of our students face when they're not on our campus, when they're not in our classrooms, when they're back at home struggling with internet connectivity, et cetera. So we believe in the power of education, or we wouldn't have bet our careers on it. And there's no question that when you think about coming through an economic catastrophe like this pandemic has been and will continue to be for some time, education is the way forward. And it's incumbent upon all of us. And that's why yesterday was such a beautiful thing to see the governor and the leaders of the General Assembly coming together so quickly and in such a bipartisan way to support this state and the people of the state. So I'm encouraged and I'm excited to take the things that we've learned, to use the learning opportunity that never waste a crisis. And this is no doubt a crisis. And we can use it to get better at what we do and lift up the people of the state through education.
Great. President Hans.
Amen to both of my colleagues. In real estate, they talk about location, location, location. When we're thinking about North Carolina's future, it really is education, education, education. Public education is the best strategy this state can pursue to grow, to prosper, to recover. That is the way forward.
Thank you. And while I have your attention, President Hans, I have another question for you before we move on. What measures is the community college system taking to prepare for an increase in enrollment post-pandemic? And how can the business community be of help?
Oh, thank you. Great question. So prior to the pandemic, we saw our first system-wide enrollment growth in a decade. And we're very proud of this because, as many of you know, our enrollment historically moves inversely to the economy. So even while the economy was growing, the community college enrollment saw a spike last year, largely because of our investment in public support for short-term workforce training programs. But we're already planning for continued growth. Most obviously, COVID-19 has changed what that growth may look like. We'll likely see a lot of adult learners coming to our doors because of the massive, alarming unemployment rates that we're experiencing right now. But whatever the profile of these new students, we'll know they'll need a few things to be ready when they arrive, to upgrade their skills or to become reskilled. We'll need our faculty and staff who are undercompensated and underrecognized. We'll need them in place to teach and guide these citizens along a path to employment or to university transfer. Many of them will come the bridge that we have with the public schools, of course, through our Career and College Promise program. We'll need to maintain that high quality online instruction, the in-person interaction I've been talking about to ensure the entire experience for those students. But we'll need business partners to tell our colleges those skills, those jobs that are most in high demand so the economy can move forward. The biggest opportunity for chamber members to help is we try to prepare our state's workforce, develop a relationship with your local college. That's always my go-to advice with business partners. Explore how we can help prepare the workers you want to hire and the ones you already have now, such as opportunities to participate in our apprenticeship program or customized job training. And I don't think any of us have a crystal ball about the future, particularly the course of this virus. But I can tell you this, your community college system is going to do our very best to be there for the business community in partnership to prepare North Carolina's workforce. You can count on us 100%.
Great. And this question, I originally had it specifically for Superintendent Jackson, but I would like all of you to take a stab at this, but I will start with Superintendent Jackson, because I want us to unpack some particular challenges that many students are going to face in the fall, such as PTSD, increased poverty, lack of community or continuity both at home and in school. So how can the broader community help to mitigate these issues now to create a healthy learning environment upon the students and teachers' return in the fall? Dr. Jackson.
I think the first thing we have to take advantage of is the opportunities to partner right now. I don't want us to believe that we have to wait until children get back to school to begin to attend to their needs. In some ways, we can partner, we can engage, we can build relationships now. I have major concerns about the connectivity, and I'm not talking about the digital connectivity that's happening. I'm talking about the human connectivity that we're having to live through because of social distancing, that we're losing track of some kids. We're very blessed to have social workers and counselors and teachers who build relationships with kids on a regular basis. We're going to need an entire community to wrap their arms around our kids. And so we're going to have to build new and different kinds of partnerships. We're going to have to build mentorships around the students. I'm also concerned that our adults, families have been impacted. And so when the adults come back to the classroom, if their needs are not met, it's going to be very hard for them to meet the full, to be prepared to meet the full gamut of needs that our students come back. So I believe that school systems and community-based agencies are going to have to develop processes for, much like if you play ball, you have to be able to give the coach a sign and say, "Coach, take me out. I need to catch my wind." We're going to have to give that kind of grace to our staffs to say, "This is hard. I need some help." We're going to have to be able to give that kind of grace to our kids to say, "This is hard. I need help." We're going to have to build more graceful environments in our schools so that as we try to educate them and move them forward, we're not forgetting that they're people. And so it's a time for unprecedented partnerships between not only professional agencies in our communities, but also with our faith-based communities, with our civic organizations. I think this is the time when we're all going to have to come together and really be community. We're going to have to really wrap our arms around one another and try the best we can to help each other figure out how we can meet the needs before kids come back and after they come back. It's not going to be they're back now, okay, turn them over to the schools. It's going to have to be, we're coming back together as a community. Now, how do we continue to take care of each other? So I believe that there's going to be a need for a long-term, unprecedented kind of relationship and a new kind of relationship between the homes, the school, business, all of those entities that make up a community. I think everyone's going to have to play a significant role in that so that we leave no person out there unprotected anyway, socially, emotionally, academically, physically, in terms of food security, all of those things. We're going to have to find a way to open our eyes and see our communities a little differently and be willing to step forward and help differently.
Chancellor Woodson, address that, but also during this time, you've had children or students still on campus because they couldn't get home. So talk to us about that as you address the question that I asked previously.
Yeah, thank you, Deborah. We have had, we normally would have around 10,000 of our 37,000 students that live on campus. Obviously, with COVID-19, we sent most of those students home for safety reasons, but we still have almost 700 students that, for a variety of reasons, are living on campus. Typically, it's because for finances. It's because of a limited opportunity to go home. Some are international students, but more often than anything, it's because if they go home, they don't have internet connectivity. And so they need the infrastructure of the university to be successful. And just like Superintendent Jackson, we're very aware of and very concerned about the issues that our students will face when they do return to campus. Many are coming from families that have been financially devastated by the pandemic, or certainly their finances have been challenged. This has been a difficult time on a lot of our students and their families. They may be coming from a family that has multiple siblings that are home trying to learn. And so we have to understand that a lot of our students have gone through a great deal this semester. But as importantly, not more importantly, but as important, we need to remember that our community of faculty and staff are equally concerned about the future. They're concerned about their own health and safety. Many of our faculty are represented by a vulnerable population to this virus. And so we've also got to learn to embrace our community and make sure that everyone knows that their health and safety is our highest priority. So as students begin to come back to campus, we've got a lot of issues that we need to prepare for. And many of them are built around this idea of community, this idea of human interaction, of supporting one another, understanding the challenges that we've all gone through, and making sure that we're doing everything in our power to help the students get through their education, but as important, paying attention to all of those that work in our environment every day.
President Hans.
I think all three of us share the same concerns and hopes. It's frustrating because right now what we need is this sense of community to support one another. And yet the very nature of this virus requires us to be distant from one another. The most simple of gestures to embrace one another with a hug of support and love, and that's not really possible right now. So it's a frustrating, challenging time for all of us, and the emotional toll of the moment has been considerable. I mean, we've had tremendous loss of life. We've had the loss of jobs and income, a startling level of unemployment, financial toll, and a loss of sense of security and safety. So this really culminates in an absolute need to reestablish that community when we can. Right now, it has to be done in a certain manner, but hopefully we'll be together once again to support one another soon. We've obviously got to provide, on a very practical level, more counseling availability to faculty, staff, students, and ensure the environment they're operating in is healthy and safe for them.
Do you all anticipate having to provide any personal protective equipment when you reopen? And I'm going to first start with Chancellor Woodson, because NC State has been doing a lot of interesting things when it comes to PPE. So if you would address that on both levels, please, sir.
Well, we certainly, I'm sure this is true for all of us, anticipate when we are able to come back together as a community that there will be a requirement for some level of social distancing where it's possible. And certainly any protective equipment that people, the face mask is one of the most critical things, not just to protect yourself, but also to protect those around you. And as Deborah, you pointed out, we have a College of Textiles, and in recent weeks, we've pivoted that college and its activities to work with a number of our private sector partners, including Brooks Brothers and Haynes, to manufacture face masks for the healthcare providers in our state. We anticipate that same activity can be brought to bear on our own community, providing face masks for those people on our campus that are concerned about protecting themselves and those around them. But I'll also remind all the listeners that in addition to the direct education that we provide at NC State, we're a large research enterprise, conducting over $500 million in research every year, and getting our graduate students and technicians and others back into the lab to do that critical research that moves our economy forward, that makes North Carolina the great economic engine that it is critical to our future. And we need to do that in a way where all the students and the faculty that are working in the labs feel confident and safe in their activities. So we certainly believe that there will be not only requirement for social distancing, but also professional protective equipment that will be required to ensure people's safety.
Dr. Jackson, would you like to address that?
I fully anticipate that it will become a part of our next to normal operational procedures. It's going to be, I see masks and potentially, particularly around first line individuals who greet the public, some types of things to to minimize that. We're currently we've got work groups that are looking at all of those areas, particularly around our operational routines. What does social distancing look like in an elementary school? What does it look like on a playground, on a school bus, in a cafeteria? Those are some really weighty questions that we're going to have to deal with and really come up with operational answers that are not only scalable for us, but also acceptable for those parents who are going to send us their kids every day, that they will recognize that those kids will be educated in a safe environment, and our employees who will recognize that they're working in a safe environment. So we're willing to do whatever is recommended by the healthcare professionals, but more importantly, what's practicable for us to do, and what makes the most sense. So that we can get about our number one mission, and that's to educate kids every day as safely as possible.
President Hans.
Deborah, we're working with the Department of Health and Human Services on their guidance for how we can reopen safely. Certainly, it will involve the use of face coverings, social distancing, frequent hand washing, et cetera, all the best known practices. We have nursing programs at 56 of our 58 community colleges, so we do have some in-house expertise in that regard. And I'm really proud of the colleges because almost all of them donated their PPE to local hospitals because there was a considerable shortage during the height of the preparation for the pandemic in North Carolina, and a shortage that occurred in that area. And so community colleges lived up to their name in that regard. But yes, we will certainly need those protections for students, staff, and faculty to feel safe coming back to campus.
And especially, did someone want to say something? Oh, are you guys getting a reverberation? Okay.
It's better now, Deborah.
Okay, great. I'm getting ready to go to some of the questions that we have from our listeners. And as we continue to talk about social distancing, someone wanted to know, what will be the future of extracurricular activities, marching bands, sports, theater, and field trips for students? What is that going to look like? And how is this going to impact them based on the virus? Who wants to go?
Dr. Jackson answered that one.
Thanks, Chancellor. Well, it's a very interesting question, because we're grappling with that right now and trying to look at what that would look like. How would that actually play out? We're going to have to social distance kids where possible, and make sure that if they're not, they are protected well. And hopefully we can continue some of those activities. I think we're going to have to depend on the creativity of those instructors to really look at how they might be able to deliver the same high quality experiences for kids in that vein. Now, you're talking to a former choral music teacher, so I'm sitting here thinking, how would I maintain a choir with maybe face coverings on? Could it happen? Or now I could distance my choir possibly, but I don't know if I could distance my band. I don't know if I could. It would be we would have to be very creative to make it happen. But we're seeing right now in the remote world that people are coming up with lots of new and creative ways to still be able to do some of the things that we thought could only happen in one space. The athletics and extracurricular activities, those are going to be challenges, because again, they depend on community and team interaction and team sports particularly. I don't know if you can social distance on a football field. I'm racking my brain with that one. I haven't figured that one out. But I do believe that we have smart people who can figure out a way to keep kids safe and still provide them with great opportunities to grow into who they should be and could be later on in life.
Chancellor Woodson, I cannot imagine this being of a concern to you whatsoever.
Yeah, Deborah, let me start with just a general comment about extracurricular. When I look at the success of our students, their ability to move through a complex university like NC State or any of our higher education system, so much of it occurs outside of the classroom. We've intentionally, in the last 10 years, we have built any number of programs designed to help our students succeed that are all extracurricular. We have living and learning villages where students live together that have a common interest. Just the entire university is built around student success so that they can get across the finish line. And we know, and I'm sure this is true of my colleagues, we know that so much of that is outside of the classroom. So I just need to be clear with you that we want to do everything we can to keep our students and our faculty and staff safe. And we will exercise every precaution that our health care providers are instructing us to do. But we do believe that in the long run, an educational system where communities come together and interact as human beings, as scholars with students, is the best instructional opportunity. Now, I think what you're trying to get me to talk about is college athletics. And like Superintendent Jackson said, there's a lot of questions around particularly contact sports and how we're able to do the things that people have come to love, both our students and our alumni, for college athletics. What I can tell you is that we are not going to put student athletes on the field of competition that are not prepared physically to do that. So it really starts with our ability to get those student athletes back in school, get them back on the field and practicing and getting themselves physically ready to compete in the sports that all of our alumni love. And we certainly hope that that happens, and we believe it will. The timeline of it is still up in the air across the entire country. But it really begins and ends, frankly, with the ability to keep the student athletes safe. And that's not only safe from the virus, but it's also physically fit and prepared to compete.
President Hans?
I certainly concur with my colleagues about the value of education gleaned outside of the classroom and the importance of extracurricular activities to that education. My sense is that mass gatherings will be difficult until there are highly effective treatments and a vaccine available to us.
Okay. Another question from the audience is, what pressures do you see in your budgets in responding to the immediate crisis?
Well, for us, there have been immediate impacts, largely built around the rapid transition to online education that had a cost associated with it, the departure of our students from campus, and the refund of all of their unused housing and dining had expenses associated with it. Many of our students have found themselves to be in a very financially challenging time, a result of a loss of a part-time job or any number of things that we've tried to respond to. There's a lot of uncertainty, at least for us, going forward. Obviously, as a state-supported university, just like my colleagues in their world, we're all worried about the state budget and the long-term financial impact of the economic downturn associated with COVID-19, how that plays out for all of us. But in the short run, there have been some serious expenses. But I want to, again, and President Hans referred to the legislature earlier in our conversation. Our state government has responded very well and has provided some immediate resources to help with this challenge, as well as the federal government through the CARES Act. and at least in our case, and like my colleagues here, there's a fair amount of federal red tape associated with those funds, but we have been able to get a significant amount of those funds out to benefit our students that have had a financial, have had financial challenge from COVID-19 very, very quickly. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, I would say that the response in terms of providing resources for those areas that we know we're going to be challenged in, digital learning, keeping employees employed, keeping facilities clean. Those the response has been, I would say, extremely on time and immediate. My concern will always be those things that we can't yet quantify, because as I said earlier in the conversation, as a public school entity, I recognize that we are serving as the shock absorber for our communities. And so there will be some unintended costs down the road that we're going to have to absorb, and when maybe some of this money has been expended. So we're going to have to be very careful and very intentional about where we target those dollars, so that when we're back to whatever that next normal turns out to be, that we're prepared to continue forward progress and not create yet another pandemic, a pandemic of opportunity, because we were not thoughtful around this and we maybe didn't use those resources well. So I would say immediately we've been resourced to meet the needs right now. My concern again are those things out in the future that we've not yet been able to put our real cost on yet, but we know they're coming.
President Hans, did you want to address that? Okay, well, this I think is for you. I am an employee of Guilford Technical Community College. I am not a teacher, but I would love the opportunity through maybe Skype or Microsoft Teams to assist teachers of K to first grade to work with students. Is there a program out there right now that could connect people like me who want to help parents and young students to study, to help them through contact with teachers in the area?
Well, great question. And I know there are similar efforts in some areas of the state, but I don't know about Guilford County. So I might ask the participant if he'd call my office and we could discuss that a little bit more. I'd like to discuss it with Dr. Clark, the president of Guilford Tech, and figure out how we can make that happen. Link up with the Guilford County Public Schools. Wonderful.
Well, good, that's great. Let's see, will there be a new registration portal? Okay, it was jumping around. Okay, will there be a new registration portal or something different rolling down from continuing education registration in the future? I have heard this, I have heard there is, but we really need something that works better than the web advisor for instant enrollment that is already virtual school hours.
Yeah. So I think that's for me as well, Deborah. Yeah, our continuing education, really what I would call workforce training, look to maybe change some of the lingo to update it, make it a little bit more intuitive. We actually have made, with the support of the legislature, a significant investment in technology in this area of continuing education, workforce training, that we are rolling out because our system was so antiquated that it sent the wrong signal to students. It sent the wrong signal to employers. It really wasn't friendly to the users in any way. Happily, the legislature recognized that, supported us with $19 million in last year's budget so that we can update that technology. We can operate more efficiently, but most importantly, we can serve the students so much more effectively. It takes a little while to get to go through the whole procurement process, which we recently completed. I signed the contract on this about a month ago. and we'll be rolling it out to the colleges over the next few months.
Thank you. We have 6 minutes before we will be closing the webinar. I have another question here. As we begin the process of recovery from COVID-19, what is in place for students who will need that extraordinary and necessary attention? Is there a plan in place to add community and academic counselors or advisors?
I had the honor of serving on the Social and Emotional Learning Reentry Committee at the state level, and I can tell you they have been working extremely hard to identify resources and agencies across the state, as well as to develop a request for additional human capital for school systems across the state and for communities across the state to begin to address those significant needs that I'm assuming your question would be speaking to, as well as providing school districts a one-stop shop in terms of resources that they might be able to use to scale social and emotional support systems at every one of our schools. Now, please understand that all of our schools K-12 schools have always had support systems in place for students who have had needs. They've varied in size and level depending on the community and depending on the resources available to support it. But right now we're looking at a system where we will have a standardized system that schools can go to say, here's a bank of resources you can use. Here are a list of providers. Here are some other ways that are going to be able to support students. I think another piece that's going to be exciting because in some of our rural communities, it's hard to find those providers, but we're seeing some progress around this whole notion of teletherapy and telesupport for our most challenged kids, and a lot of people are using that now, and we're seeing success with that, especially where you can't hire a therapist, or you can't hire a counselor, or you can't hire a person that will come, but they will provide the therapy in that way, and the choice is either not doing it or doing it in that fashion. I think there will be more portals and more opportunities for that to happen as well. But I can tell you there is a state group that's been working pretty much since the day this event, since the day schools closed, to address this issue and to have some things in place the minute we open the doors back up for student interaction, faculty interaction.
Deborah, if we have time, I'd like to try to address at least, I realize the person posing the question didn't necessarily intend it for the university system, but I would like to acknowledge that so many of our students need both wellness counseling, mental health counseling, as well as academic advising. And one of the really positive outcomes of this for us has been to realize how much more, particularly wellness and mental health counseling, we can provide to our students through tele-counseling services. And we employ many counselors on our campus, and the need is almost unquenchable for the students that need their support and their counseling. And we have really been impressed with the ability of these counselors to pivot and to be able to provide our students a lot of support over by distance education models. So that's an outcome that certainly will serve us well going forward and prepare us to be ready for the students when they return on campus.
Well, we have 2 more minutes, and there is a question here for you, Chancellor Woodson, specific to NC State.
Yes.
They're wondering, how are you preparing for classes to be delivered in person in the fall? And also, what kind of preparations are being made to handle students living on campus in the fall?
Yep. Well, let me start by saying we have not made final decisions about the fall, and President Roper has been working with each of the chancellors in the UNC system to make sure that the system is thinking about these questions with some level of uniformity, although each campus is different and serves different communities. So we're preparing to bring students back in the fall, being very responsive to social distancing, the idea around the size of classes that we would be offering, trying to reduce large sections of classes, looking for every available space on our campus to make sure that we're providing, it's not just a number of students, but it's the physical environment that they're in for instruction that we're paying a lot of attention to. On the residence hall, I mean, I'm sure Superintendent Jackson can relate to this. When you get 37,000 students working and living and studying together on a campus as large as NC State, you can manage social distancing, but at the end of the day, students are going to be students and they're going to make decisions that adults have to make. And so we're going to provide all the guidance that we can and provide and try to structure the environment to be as safe and healthy as possible, both for the faculty and staff and the student, and be as prepared as possible to open in the fall. That's our plan. Someone once said, you know, plan for the best, but be prepared for the worst. And we're planning for everything in between.
Thank you, Chancellor Woodson, NC State University, President Hans, the North Carolina Community Colleges, and Superintendent Anthony Jackson. We greatly appreciate you taking time out today to discuss education, the road to recovery and resiliency. I know that you could be so many other places, but you decided to spend some time with us. And we thank our audience who gave us the questions. Unfortunately, we could not get to all of those, but we thank you as well for tuning in for this discussion. Have a great day. Janelle?
Thank you, Deborah. Thank you all for attending today's presentation on education, the road to recovery and resiliency. We hope you found today's content valuable. You will receive a brief survey at the end of the you'll receive a brief survey of the webinar via email. We would appreciate any feedback you can provide to allow us to improve these sessions. Again, the recording of today's webinar will be made available to you via email within 24 hours of the webinar. Thank you all. Stay safe and healthy during this time. Take care.